I'm your host, Christina Farris, coming live from Turtle30Seashell.com home. Today is October 29th, 2016. Lesson is called Miracles. The scripture passage comes from Mark 6:45 through 56, out of the King James Bible. And straightway he constrained the disciples to get into the ship and go to the other side before unto Bethsaida, while he sent away the people. And when he had sent them away, he departed to the mountain to pray. And when even was come, the ship was in the midst of the sea, and he alone on land. And he saw all them toiling and rowing, for the wind was contrary unto them. And about the fourth watch of night he cometh unto them, walking upon the sea, and would have passed by them. But when they saw him walking upon the sea, they supposed it had been a spirit, and cried out, for all had saw him, and were troubled. And immediately he talked with them, and said unto them, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And he went up unto them into the ship, and the wind ceased. They were sore amazed in themselves beyond measure, and wondered. For they considered not the miracles of the loaves, for their hearts was hardened. And when they had passed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret, and drew to the shore. And when they were come out of the ship, straightway they knew him, and ran through that whole region round about, and began to carry about in beds those that were sick, where they heard he was. And whithersoever he entered into a village or city or country, they laid their sick in the street, and besought him that they may touch him, if it were but the border of his garment. And as many as touched him were made whole. Mark 7:24 through 37. And from thence he rose and went into the borders of Tyre and Sidon. And entered into the house, and would have no man know it, but he could not hide. For a certain woman, whose young daughter had an unclean spirit, heard of him, and came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Suffetian by nation, and she besought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. But Jesus said unto her, Let the children first be filled, for it is not meet to take the children's bread, and to cast it unto the dogs. And she answered and said unto him, Yes, Lord, yet the dogs on the table of the children's crumbs. Dogs on the table eat of the children's crumbs. And he said unto her, For this saying, go thy way, the devil is gone out of thy daughter. And when she was come to her house, she found the devil gone out, and her daughter laid upon the bed. And again, departing from the coast of Tyre and Sidon, he came unto the sea of Galilee, to the midst of the coast of Decapolis. And they, bringing unto him one that was deaf, and had an impediment in his speech, and they beseeched him to put his hand upon him. And he took him aside from the multitude, and put his fingers in his ears, and he spit and touched his tongue. And looking up into heaven, he sighed and said unto him, Ephphatha, that is, be open. And straightway his ears were opened, and the strings of his tongue were loosened, and he spake plainly. And he charged them that they should tell no man. But the more he charged them, so much the more a great deal that published it. And were beyond measure astonished, saying, He hath done all things well. He maketh both the deaf to hear, and the dumb to speak. Last week it looks as if I overlooked the end of chapter 6, so today I'm combining both the end of 6 and 7 to talk about Jesus' power. The first thing Jesus did after feeding of the 5,000 was depart to the mountains, a place of solitude. Jesus taught prayer and fasting was necessary for certain miracles. With Jesus being who he was, he still found the need to fast and pray in the human flesh. Jesus was both spirit and flesh. As Jesus walked upon the water, it appeared Jesus looked like a spirit in the middle of the waves. As the wind whipped around, the disciples who he had sent out earlier. He appeared to startle them, but despite the ability to feed 5,000 with so little bread and fish, had they forgotten the one miracle already? How could they deny the power of God? Simply, their hearts were hardened to the miracles. It's easier to doubt than to believe. Yet throughout Jesus' ministry, there were some places he went to that miracle occurred and the crowd were gathered. There were other miracles only his disciples were a witness to. Jesus appeared as a spirit moving across the water and appeared in all humanity before the disciples as he walked to the ship, and the waves and the wind around him calmed. Truth, he was all flesh from the beginning to the end of the story. Imagine having someone appear right in the middle of the freeway. For a moment, you are not sure if it's real or human, especially in the middle of the night, and the next he is real. But you are 40 miles from nowhere, not expecting to see someone, and then see someone. It's like a ghost effect or a mirage effect, but one realizes it is true. Jesus' disciples was in a state of reality and unbelieving. Every believer goes through the periods of doubt and unbelief. The believer is more than the woman begging Jesus to cast the demons out of her daughter. It was not she did not believe, but Jesus made inquiry of who she fed first, the children or the dogs. Jesus fed his disciples first, and then the Gentiles. The Gentile woman was considered a dog or outcast from the Jewish faith, and maybe even her own, because she's a woman of whoredom. Yet he had mercy for her, for she said, even so, the dogs need food. In fact, Jesus was first to his people, then to the Gentiles, and he ministered to both groups of people, healing and casting out demons, never giving thought to denying anyone that came to him. No one was ever denied, but the issue of the segregation was spoken about. It was spoken in a way of, "How come you come asking if you know I am a Jew?" replied Jesus. A Jew by birth was a very segregated people, though they ministered to all nations. God's own people blinded to miracles performed, but the Gentiles and outcasts knew that Jesus was the Messiah. A man needing healing to be able to speak correctly and hear came to Jesus, and Jesus entered his dwelling and closed the door. He performed the miracle behind the closed door of the Gentile nation. Why? Because the word spread like wildfire. Jesus told the Gentile to not tell anyone, and they believed like a gossip columnist in New York, with no regards to anyone's freedom of privacy or protection. The Gentile salvation of knowing God's wonderful work had come to them. Yet it would take Apostle Peter to have dreams about eating pork to get off his high seat and reach out to the Gentile nation in Acts 10. God was not just a God to the Jewish people, but to all people. God calls his people to share his truth. God is not a God of segregation, but a God to all people. Jesus did miracles among those that would believe and taught them his ways. The problem was the crowd was like a Texas stampede. Jesus needed not a publisher, but witnesses going and sharing, and being like the 70 disciples he would send out in his name, healing the sick and casting out demons, people to teach and preach the gospel. Jesus calls each and every one of us to spread his word. Are you willing to share the gospel of Jesus with the world? You are reading this online. Think for a moment, how can you share Jesus online? Be creative as God speaks to you by his Spirit. May God bless you in your efforts to share Jesus.